Talking about video games in the modern day can be weird. You can play something at launch, but patches can greatly change the experience. Though often developers can only upend so much after release. I love Xenoblade Chronicles 2, yet even today it's packed with issues. The humanoid weapons, known as blades, are both a blessing and a curse. I believe a part of the reason why Xenoblade Chronicles 2 sold so well was because of their attractive designs. At the same time, they're also central to the game's greatest problems. Issues like the frustrating skill checks, random pulls, as well as excessive inventory management couldn't be addressed without making significant changes or undermining the game's structure, which makes Torna The Golden Country an interesting bit of downloadable content. It is a separate experience. They even sold it on its own cartridge. That clean break allowed the developers to rework the design. It's also more compact, resulting in something that feels punctual and refined. This separation from the core experience, along with the limitations of its scale, make for a better game. Though I find it a bit hard to say how well it stands on its own, largely due to the story. It's heavily based on the events that occurred in the flashbacks of Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Because of that, you won't necessarily learn anything new here. If Torna The Golden Country is your first exposure to this universe, I'd imagine much of the narrative wouldn't be satisfying without the larger context. It's neither a standalone epic or a revelation. Instead, it focuses more on fleshing out certain key figures that didn't get their due, like Torna's protagonist Laura, who in the original story is more of a justification for a motive than a character. Here, you'll see how she goes from essentially being a broke mercenary to a key player and attempting to protect the Kingdom of Torna. This is alongside the warrior of legend Adam, together with Hugo, who I don't know if Hugo was ever mentioned before, but here he is. Blades, while still central to everything, have been clipped down to just 6 characters, all of which have been pre-assigned to masters known as drivers. On paper, fewer blades along with less customization might sound like a downgrade. However, their reduced number is actually a strength. Gone are the random blade pulls. The removal of this feature improves every part of the game. It means less menu management, fewer obscure skill checks that thwart your progress, together with a more stable party balance. Lore-wise, blades sharing their weapons with their master is a fighting technique that's not yet fully developed, which is a good excuse for switching up the blade and driver dynamics in combat. In Xenoblade Chronicles 2, the driver performs the majority of the actions, while the blade simply stood around with their hands out for 70 hours. In Torna, each driver as well as blade hold their own weapon, acting more as separate but equal companions. This also means a blade can move to the forefront of battle, while the driver can step back into an AI-controlled support role that uses various skills. Though like the main game, they act as one entity. Swapping between these characters mid-combat cancels attack animations, builds meters for chain attacks, and, new to Torna, restores recoverable health. Characters bounce between these roles with an additional blade in reserve that can be actively swapped in. It creates a presentation that feels more frantic, as everyone on the field is actively engaged. There's also some non-blade related quality of life changes to combat. In the main release, using a series of elemental skills in a row resulted in a special attack. Making an invalid combo was fairly punishing, as you had to wait until the meter timed out to start over. Here, there are generic finishers that don't do as much damage as the named ones, but lets you cut your losses. It's a handy change that's weirdly paired with a bizarre decision. They hit the combo chart that was in the top right corner of the screen, so you have to memorize them now. I'm not sure why they did this. Maybe to remove some of the clutter from the user interface? It's an inconvenient change in a title that's largely filled with smart redesigns, some of which can be harder to notice than others. Changes to the world design itself can be easy to overlook. The Tornan continent is unique to this expansion, offering a variety of environments, from forests, as well as plains, to a large desert. More importantly, I think there's a big improvement in the area structure here. The areas in Xenoblade Chronicles 2 feel messy. Without a map for reference, it was easy to get lost. For a series with one of its main gimmicks being that it takes place on massive creatures, not having a grasp on the environment lessens the impact. I didn't talk about it in my original review since I didn't know how to communicate this, and they also introduced some patches that helped with the game's waypoint system. In playing Torna, I think I finally came to a conclusion on what was missing. The Torna environments in this release are all open, but have strategically placed landmarks that lead the player through various paths of an area before centralizing into one key location that transforms into another zone. This gives the player the freedom to explore while still driving their progression. Due to the focus on a single continent in Torna, there are clear connections between areas that ultimately flesh out where you're at on the giant beast you're riding. I feel like this is more true to the design of the original Xenoblade Chronicles. Xenoblade Chronicles 2 areas feel directionless with a lack of landmarks to draw the player through the environment to key locations. On the other hand, that title is also stretched across multiple continents and a full 70-hour adventure, so maybe it was diluted to the point that it was harder to recognize the structure of the beasts. Torna is more like 15 to 20 hours, however rarely does it feel compromised by that. The main story is built with the same quality of the core game, complete with some well-choreographed scenes, as well as the series' usual accented voice acting.
It works out well for me. I have always wanted to put myself on the line for our people.
Though, like the base game, some of the line reads here and there do sound a bit off. Adam, in particular, has a few moments.
I see. So that's when... What a sad tale, Laura.
Oh, here we go again.
If it's bad enough for you, there's always Japanese voice acting. Where concessions are made for scale, it's almost always an improvement, like the onboarding process, which will have the players up to speed with the battle system in the first hour or so, versus the base game's slow 10 to 20 hour rollout of its mechanics. Though there is one obvious compromise with the story progression that I think will annoy many people. There's a decent number of side quests here. And by side, I mean mostly mandatory. Starting through the main plot will result in hitting a wall that will block progress without clearing a fairly large number of NPC requests. These are of a fine quality when it comes to writing and storytelling, but they lack presentation. They're also somewhat generic in design with a lot of kill X number of this and collect X number of that. I think you know whether or not this is going to be a problem for you. I personally had plenty of side quests done before hitting the check, so it wasn't really a problem. It is definitely a form of padding. Nevertheless, the limited scale makes these quests feel more purposeful. A large portion of them are based out of the main town. This focus on one core location allows you to learn about the community and how their problems fit together. Eventually, these accumulate into a final quest that creates a loosely fitted, yet satisfying narrative about the citizens. The steps along the way aren't necessarily dramatic. Still, it's a mix of humor, touching character interactions, together with some more depressing tales. The character development, mechanical changes, and world design aspects of Torna The Golden Country don't feel overstretched or stunted by the game's short length. The story is really the major flaw here. It's not bad, it just doesn't stand on its own or add that much to the series' lore. If you've played Xenoblade Chronicles 2, I'm guessing you've already given Torna The Golden Country a look. If you haven't, you really should. Can you play this before Xenoblade Chronicles 2? Gameplay-wise, for sure. If anything, I'd say it's preferred. But when it comes to the story, I can't fully speak to that. I will say I don't think you'd do any harm to yourself. If you did get around to playing Xenoblade Chronicles 2 afterwards, I feel like you just have more context earlier than a normal player. Though the onboarding process of that game might become a bit more egregious if you can compare it to Torna. As much as I loved Xenoblade Chronicles 2, the flawed design left me a bit unsure of whether or not Monolith Soft knew what made the Wii original accessible. You would think with Torna being a better game, I would reflect more positively on them. Instead, it leaves me a bit puzzled. While most of the changes made in Torna benefited the core design, many were also made to address the shorter length. So I'm not sure if the decisions were by choice or necessity. While that's pertinent for the future of the developer, whether or not the success they found was intentional doesn't change that this is a great improvement in a tiny package.
Hypergraviton topple! Good job!
Thanks for watching. One Controller Port has a focus on games with a notable place in history, as well as titles with a distinct take on a franchise or genre. Visit onecontrollerport.com for videos, podcasts, streams, and articles. You can also follow me on Twitter and Twitch via the links in the description.